Tonight, we get you sharp as you move around through the rest of the year. We'll tell you about a great event happening at BRCC next week, and I want to tell you about this book that you have to have. Roll it, Scott. You know, one of the things that I often talk about here in Louisiana is we don't celebrate our positive stories enough. We don't talk enough about our wins and the great history out of one of the greatest states in our country. And we'll begin tonight with a conversation with one of my dearest friends, Ken Dawson, former parish president in West Feliciana Parish, administrator and in Ascension Parish, and now he's on the campus of the Southern University.
Go Jags.
Go Jags, running the engineering department there. And Ken also has an interesting piece of history. His grandfather founded a school in St. Francisville many moons ago, and that story is a part of a book called Notable People of Color, St. Francisville, Louisiana, by Dr. Henry Hardy. We were talking before the show started.
Yeah.
Ken, first of all, good seeing you, brother.
Good to see you, my friend.
We started off by talking about the origins of this home. Tell me a little bit about how this got started.
I mean, it's an interesting story, Clay, because Dr. Henry Hardy was a graduate of J.S. Dawson High School. And it's amazing those schools at that time, the effect it had on the students. I mean, I had older people that attended school that would sit there and cry when they tell stories about the effect the teachers had on their lives. So Dr. Henry Hardy was working with us with the J.S. Dawson Foundation, and we were preparing to renovate the school, you know, getting funding and moving that process. Well, he was searching the web one morning, and he came across a website that listed notable people in the area. So he looked at the notable people in West Feliciana Parish, St. Francisville, and there was one notable person of color.
Y'all ain't gonna believe this. You're not gonna believe this. Who was a notable person?
Derek Todd Lee.
Serial killer.
Serial killer was the only person of color listed as notable in West Feliciana Parish, St. Francisville.
How his history makes him notable, I don't know. That's a stretch of the use of the word.
Right.
But then from that moment when Dr. Hardy saw that, what did he do next?
Well, first he called me about 10 times, being totally outraged and incensed about something of that nature. And then he decided to do something about it. That was the nature of Dr. Henry Hardy. 4 math degrees, taught in academia, so he's used to getting things done.
Right.
So what he did is that he decided to write a book, and write a book about the notable people that he knew were in West Feliciana Parish, that lived in West Feliciana Parish. Now, this probably is not all encompassing, but it definitely identifies some notable people.
Well, let's start with Dr. Dawson, and tell his story before we move to some of the other notables.
Well, I tell you what, with my grandfather, John Sterling Dawson, and in the book it goes back to even, back to the plantation where his ancestry came from. But John S. Dawson came from Mississippi on the train to Wakefield, at 19, to come in and teach young black boys and girls how to read and write. Now, that was in the 1890s. Now, if you start thinking about that time of history, and I guess the chances of getting in a little bit of trouble of doing that kind of thing, it was amazing. Being killed, exactly. But the interesting thing that he was met by 2 white gentlemen, that also were a part of doing the right thing. And I always say that that's because people that have the right heart would do the right thing. So my grandfather started teaching. So he went to the different churches and started telling people about coming to school. And there were school churches because, of course, there was not anything built at that time. So the first day, he had 25 kids. Second day, it was like 125, something of that nature. So he was able to establish that and work through beginning education in West Feliciana Parish in that method.
I mean, it's such an amazing story, and Ken and I have been friends a long time, and I remember one of the first times we had a conversation about that, and I know the pride you have every time you talk about your grandfather and what he did. I don't think in 2023 we understand the gravity of what he did, because he could have been killed for what he did, but also the impact on people that he introduced to education. Obviously, we talked about this with you being at Southern, being at Southern, education is important to you. Did you ever hear about threats or some of the pressure that he was under at the time because he chose to do this?
Yes, I had stories that I did hear about threats, that when he would walk through the town, he would hear people that was really kind of talking him down. But this was the story that they told me. He'd have his hat on, and every time they would say it, he was just kind of nod his head as if paying homage, right, nodding his head. But he said to himself, he was saying, I have the knowledge.
And he did have the knowledge.
And he did have the knowledge.
Well,
exactly.
I want to talk with Ken more about some of the other notable people in West Feliciana Parish and kind of talk a little bit about the importance of celebrating each other. So Ken Dawson is our guest for another segment here on the show. And then we're going to get you right, suit ready. My guy, Grayson Augustus, and he actually built this one for me. We'll talk about that. And Baton Rouge Community College has a fantastic event taking place next Thursday that we'll tell you about. That's coming up here on the show. Y'all stay right there. Still having our conversation with Ken Dawson about the book Notable People of Color, St. Francisville, Louisiana.
Absolutely.
You get some good catfish in St. Francisville.
The best.
Well, let's not get carried away now. So outside of Dr. Dawson, whom else would you say is a notable person that might surprise people when they read the book?
I think one of the notable people that may surprise some people is Milton Scott.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that, Milton, he was a year ahead of me in high school. We were at Southern University together, and then Milton went off to Houston for Arthur Anderson accounting firm. Okay. Well, what they don't know is that Milton was the first black partner of that firm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so a lot of people probably don't know it. In fact, I didn't really know it until the time you start to explain it in the book.
Right.
But I think that's a huge accomplishment. And another one, maybe give me a little bit of bragging rights, but I have someone that's notable as well, who I taught him everything he knows on the keyboard, and and that's my brother Thomas Dawson, who is the music director for the Commodores.
Yes.
Okay?
You taught him everything he knows.
Everything you know. A little hard, but I finally got through it.
That's amazing. The fascinating thing about this is the absence of self-pride I see in communities of color so often, because the negatives are talking about. Dr. Pam Jones is going to be in our next segment, and we were on a call yesterday talking about that, the wins and the positives that happen in communities, and people don't do that. They always talk about the negatives.
That's right.
And you know this, it's only a small percentage of people in disinvested communities that create the havoc.
Exactly. That's right.
The majority of the people just want to live their lives just like anyone else.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's the same thing we in West Feliciana, Clay. You and I have worked a long time together in doing things that are positive for people. And then when you look at Smith, Isaac Smith, who's a major general, came from a potato farm, planting in West Feliciana, became a major general. You have judges in here, and you have Joseph Carter, who was the first man that received the right to vote in 1963 in West Feliciana. And think about all the things that they had to go through to have that happen. So you're right, it's presenting the positive, and I think that it's important that the young people in West Feliciana all over understand that there are some people that did some things pretty significant that paved the way. And I am honored, to be associated with the Dawson family, but also honored to be working with the people who attend this school, because as I told you, they tell stories about the impact that these teachers had in their lives and what they poured into them, that they cried. Right. It's not zero tolerance. Right. It's that age is that there's certain things will not be tolerated because we expect more.
That's right. That's right. Where did that change?
Wow. I think it changed when there was some things in school where kids did not have maybe sometime after desegregation. I think the kind of things that were done with young people in those African American schools were different. For instance, one gentleman told me, he said he wanted to get his class ring and he couldn't afford it. So he went to my uncle, who was principal at the time. They called him Big John, only because he was a small guy, right? So so anyway, John told him, my uncle told him, tell them to go get your ring. And he got his ring. And this man sat and cried. He said, there are many people who wouldn't have done that. So the thing is that people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. Right. And I think that we have gotten away from showing even the young people how much we care. Because if I'm concerned about your story and who you are, and I take time to listen to that, then I could be able to teach. first if I could be concerned about you. And I think that has changed.
I love your passion for this project, and this is the person that I've known for so long. If someone wants to get this book, where can they get the book?
There's a website that will be the J.S. Dawson Foundation website that you can get the book. And we're a small town, probably. It will be at the library. We'll be at some places that in different establishments that we'll be selling it. And anybody can get in touch with me anytime. I'll be glad to.
And I want to do this too. I think for people who've never been to St. Francisville,
yeah, it's
a worthwhile trip to go and tour the city. There are things there about history, both Louisiana and African American, that I think you'll see from the plantations there. And
yes,
it's worth the trip. Would you agree?
I agree, and even the new mayor has a trolley in the town now that even helps move the people around and have them to come to different places. Some nice restaurants that I got to take you to that weren't there years ago.
You didn't even say that on the camera here. Whose treat is it?
Ambrose.
Ambrose Sims, my good friend Ambrose Sims.
Right.
Notable people of color, St. Francisville, Louisiana. Read about some of the history there. Dr. Dawson, Ken's grandfather, and his brother with the Commodores, who I haven't seen in a long time either.
I'll get you a ticket next time they close. Backstage, all of that, okay?
Y'all heard all of that. You know it's on film now. Hey, brother, appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Clay. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about what's happening at BRCC next.